Hi, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Ravencast. My name is Adam Ericksen, and I am here with my colleague,
Suzanne Ross.
Hi, Suzanne. How are you?
Hi, Adam. I'm great.
Oh,
Thanks.
I'm glad that you are great because today is Friday, January 20th, and you
Yes.
may have heard that there is an inauguration going on today.
That I thought that was a fake news story.
Fake news. No,
No,
it's true.
it's
It's
true.
true. And it's also true that Donald Trump is now no longer President-elect Donald Trump. He is just President Donald Trump. So here
It's
we are.
yeah, it's easier to say.
I guess,
Yeah.
yes, still painful for many of us,
Yeah,
including
it is.
myself, which brings me to the point, I think, of our conversation today, is that there are many protests going on. And you know what? I love a good protest.
Yes,
I
I
do.
know.
I'm
There's a lot going on. In fact, some of my women friends are going. There's different women's marches, one in Washington, one in Chicago, and I think around the country as well.
Yeah, there's
So
all kinds of protests going on here in Portland. But here in Portland, we like to protest. It's just what we do.
it's who you are.
It's who we are. Yeah, yeah, just
Yes.
protest. And I love a good protest because there is a deep spiritual tradition of protest within the Jewish Christian tradition. So the prophets we often think of are people who look off into the future and tell us what's going to happen. That's not it. Prophets are prophets are protesters. Prophets are the ones who come to political leaders and say, you have messed it up or you are going to mess up and here's what we need to do differently. So there's this huge tradition of protest within our religious traditions.
Well, for sure, and the prophets also are trying to give voice to people without a voice in the power structures. They're speaking on behalf of the poor, the immigrant, the sojourner among them, the widows, people on the margins of the economy. Yeah,
Yes, it's a brilliant point. Walter Brueggemann says that when we think of justice, it's about what I deserve for myself. But when
yeah.
the biblical prophets speak about justice, it's always justice for those who are on the margins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And I think the protests we're seeing right now that are connected with the inauguration and the weekend of the inauguration are just that. The people who are feeling marginalized, who are feeling powerless, who are feeling like they're going to be left out, are saying, "Hello,
Right.
don't forget about us."
Yes, yes. And this is your job as a political leader is to care for those who are often forgotten about. That's your primary job. So
Well,
it's good to have these protests to
yeah.
remind us of what political leaders are there for. But on the other hand, mimetic theory has taught me that there is a danger to protesting. There is a sense in which protesting can backfire. And I think that's important for us to recognize and talk about too.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that what mimetic theory points to is how a protest can just be a symptom of rivalry, and how rivalry can be exacerbated by protests. I mean, I don't think that's what's going on with the protest marches and so forth, but what I really would like to do is sort of apply these mimetic insights about protest and rivalry to the elected officials that are boycotting the inauguration, because I really think they are not operating from a powerless position. They're operating from a position of some power, and they are certainly operating from within a rivalrous relationship with the new president.
Right.
So those are warning signs, I would think.
Well, and you see this so clearly when you compare the beginning of Barack Obama's presidency with the beginning of Trump's presidency. So at the beginning of Barack Obama's presidency, the Republicans were like, we are not going to allow him to pass anything that he wants through. We're going to boycott. This was their form of protesting
Yes,
Barack
indeed.
Obama. And we see something similar happening at the beginning of Trump's presidency, kind of an imitation of this kind of protest. We're not going to show up to his inauguration. We're just going to protest right from the very beginning and not let him get through what he wants to get through.
Right. And I think that one thing that Renee Girard talked about repeatedly was this role of imitation within rivalry. You know, rivals think they're completely independent of one another, that they're unique players in this, and they're nothing like their opponent, when in reality, they are sort of locked in this imitation of desires, actually, to be the one with the most power, to be the one with the most authority, with the most votes, the one who has the highest position of authority in our country and power, which is the presidency. So they're locked in this. You know, one of the things that's very hard to grasp about mimetic theory is that desire itself is imitated, and even desires for power and for what we might say are intangible things like prestige and power and authority. These things are learned and acquired by imitation.
Yeah, and it's desire, and it's also methods of achieving this goal of power. So what I mean by that is you end up imitating opposition.
Yes.
So if Trump is going to oppose us, well, we have to oppose him. And you get into this, it looks, as you say, like we're complete opposites, but actually we are imitating one another in the spirit of opposition. Now, there are important things to oppose. No doubt about it. And there are times, maybe frequently in the next 4 to 8 years, however long this is going to last, where we're going to have to say no to this. And that's important. That's part of the prophetic role of those who are in leadership too. But it's important not to get stuck in the no.
Yes.
Because when you get stuck in the no, you lose your vision.
Yep.
And you also feed into the beast. And what I mean by that is not the beast that is Donald Trump, but the beast that is the rivalry between us.
Yes.
In a sense, all Donald Trump wants is for us to oppose him at every turn, because it just makes him stronger.
It proves his point that he's the best. I mean, there's this great line in people who read Renee and follow mimetic theory know this book, I See Satan Fall Like Lightning. And on page 10, he makes this point to affirm what you're saying, Adam, that the appearance of a rival who's opposing me actually validates my own desire and the immense value of the object that I now possess. So nothing feeds the Trump ego more than to oppose him, because your opposition is proof to him that he has what you want. Right? And that makes it even more valuable.
It is tricky. It's part of the scandal that is politics. It's part of the trap that is politics, because there are things that we need to oppose. But the risk is that it just feeds into the problems that we are experiencing.
Well, absolutely. And that in the previous page, Renee points out that escalation is one of the risks of rivalry, that it just intensifies. The imitation gets so intense that you don't even see it. And the rivalry escalates to such a point that you lose sight of any kind of contact with reality. All that really matters is the rivalry in front of you, and beating your rival. Gosh, even if it means sort of sabotaging your own values and held beliefs and agenda, things that you hold dear. It's paradoxical, but opposition can actually, as you say, be actually a way of propping someone up in their position and their sense of themselves, and it inflates their ego position.
Well, the example of this that we are experiencing now is that people are viewing Donald Trump and the presidency as the same exact thing. Right. So this is a way of giving Trump more power than he deserves. So what I mean by this is that the presidency was there before Trump, and the presidency is going to be there after Trump. The presidency defines the president more than the president defines the presidency. This is why we have checks and balances.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
So for me, the best model of this is Congressman Elijah Cummings. Elijah Cummings grew up as a boy. When he was a boy, segregation was ending. And so he was one of the first African American boys to go to elementary school, integrated elementary school, and also to go into desegregated pools. Well, he tells this story about when he was growing up and going to one of these pools where people were just throwing rocks and bottles at him, and he says, calling us anything but a child of God. So he grows up in this experience and becomes a lawyer to fight for civil rights. And this is what he does in Congress since 1996. He's fighting for African Americans, for women, for LGBTQ people. And he says this week that he is going to go to the inauguration. Not so much to support Donald Trump, but because he says the inauguration is bigger than the president, Trump. There are things that are bigger than Trump, and the inauguration is one of them. The presidency is one of them. The other thing that he said earlier in this week when he was talking about this was that when it comes to Donald Trump and reducing the cost of prescription drugs, when it comes to Donald Trump and having health care for all people, which is something that Donald Trump has said that he wants, Elijah Cummings says, let's work on those things. Let's work together on those things. And he also says, I know that Donald Trump wants the American people to do well. So here is Elijah Cummings, Democrat, fighting for civil rights, kind of putting himself on the side of Donald Trump when it comes to these issues that Democrats hold dearly. Right. But Elijah Cummings also says, when it comes to moral issues that we disagree vehemently on, I'm going to fight you.
Yeah.
We're gonna go to battle over these things. This, I think, is what democracy depends on: is a loyal opposition, a faithful opposition. Like, we're gonna work together on the things that we can work together on, and when we have disagreements, we're gonna fight about those things.
Well, exactly, and what that example Representative Cummings is offering is of someone who is not caught up in the rivalry, who's not being defined by being in opposition to this personality that's kind of larger than life, and finding a way to, well, Renee says that the way to sort of diffuse rivalry is for you to be quiet and untroubled in your position. So Cummings is quiet and untroubled and secure in his own position of authority, of giving voice to his constituency, and confident that he can do that, and also giving his opponent some space to be other than just something that he has to oppose, right? So it makes space for Trump to be a little bit more than just a rival. And I just think that phrase, quiet and untroubled, is a good model for us to remember that when we are agitated and overwrought, that we might be too hyper engaged in rivalry to the detriment of what we hold dear.
Yeah. Excellent. So those are our thoughts about the inauguration and the protests. Keep the protests up. Be like the prophets. When there's something to say no to, let's say no. And let's also try to find ways that we can work together for a better future. So, yeah, thanks for joining us. And if you have thoughts on this, we would love to hear what you think. Leave them in the comments. We're up on iTunes and up on Stitcher, so if you can leave a comment and rate our show there, it would be awesome if you gave us 5 rankings, 5 stars, whatever it is.
Whatever they are.
Please do that. And let us know what you think. So thank you for joining us. Grace and peace be with you.